The moment you see it, you can't unsee it. One player sits out a game completely because of a lower leg injury listed as too risky. 24 hours later, that same player is on the court for 38 minutes straight. Not a gradual return, not a cautious minutes restriction to ease back into competition. Full game minutes, more minutes than your leading scorer, and the player who actually suited up the day before. Limited to 2-minute intervals that barely gave her time to establish any rhythm whatsoever. This isn't bad luck. This isn't coincidental timing or medical caution swinging wildly. Once you see the full picture, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore, and what emerges is something far more deliberate. What we're witnessing in Indianapolis is a calculated effort to control a narrative, and it's happening right in front of us in the box scores and rotation decisions that don't make basketball sense. Let's establish the exact timeline because the details here are everything. The Los Angeles Sparks come to Indianapolis. Caitlin Clark is active. The coaching staff puts her in the game, but here's where it gets strange. She plays in 2-minute stretches throughout the contest. Not 5 minutes, not 3 minutes, 2 minutes at a time. That's barely enough time to read the opposing defense, let alone get into any offensive flow or make a meaningful impact. She's in, she's out, she's in again. Disorienting for a player trying to find her rhythm, especially a rookie trying to establish herself at the professional level. And Aliyah Boston, the all-star center, the pick-and-roll partner who should be opening up driving lanes and space for a young point guard. She doesn't play at all. 0 minutes. The official explanation from the coaching staff and medical team is straightforward. Lower leg injury, too risky. Can't put her on the court. It's a reasonable-sounding explanation on its surface. Injuries happen, medical caution is appropriate, but then the calendar flips. Game 2 arrives 24 hours later. Phoenix Mercury comes to town. Caitlin Clark is suspended because of technical foul accumulation, so she's unavailable. Suddenly, miraculously, that lower leg injury that was deemed too risky to even test in game action has healed enough for Aliyah Boston to play a full 38 minutes. Not 10 minutes on a cautious restriction. Not 15 minutes to see how she feels. Not even 25 minutes as a gradual return. 38 minutes of full game action, which means she played more minutes than Kelsey Mitchell, your leading scorer. She played more minutes than anyone else on the entire roster. This is the moment where coincidence becomes difficult to defend. This is where the story shifts from bad timing to something that requires explanation. If Boston's injury was legitimate enough to sit her out completely when Clark was playing, what changed in 24 hours that made her suddenly available for near maximum minutes? The medical staff doesn't typically clear a player for 38 minutes of action when they couldn't clear her for even 5 minutes the day before. That's not how recovery from lower leg injuries works. That's not how cautious medicine works. That's how narratives get constructed. From a pure strategic standpoint, think about what this actually accomplishes. Your franchise player, the woman who brought unprecedented attention and revenue to your organization, gets put in a game without her primary scoring partner. She's limited to such short rotations that she can't establish any offensive rhythm. She can't build confidence. She can't get into the flow of the game. Meanwhile, when she's not on the court, you suddenly have all your best players healthy and available for heavy minutes. Aliyah Boston goes from unplayable to irreplaceable. Kelsey Mitchell gets 29 points and 8 assists, which is remarkable because Kelsey Mitchell averaged 2.1 assists per game last season. She's a score-first guard. She doesn't naturally facilitate at that level. So where did 8 assists come from in one game?
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
They came directly from having a healthy, dominant Aliyah Boston rolling to the basket, posting up, creating easy passing opportunities. It's the exact same Aliyah Boston who couldn't spare even 5 minutes to support Caitlin Clark 24 hours earlier. The optics here are devastating once you actually look at them. The Fever lose to the Sparks with Clark playing in those bizarre 2-minute increments, without her best scoring partner, without offensive rhythm. Then they beat the Mercury without her, with Boston playing a full game with everyone healthy, with everyone available. And now the narrative writes itself into existence. The Indiana Fever are 4-0 without Caitlin Clark. They're better without their star rookie. The team functions more smoothly when she's not on the court. The organization didn't have to explicitly push that story. They didn't have to hold a press conference and announce it. The games themselves tell that story when you set them up this way. The wins speak louder than any official statement ever could. Here's what makes this particularly insidious, though. Look deeper into that Phoenix game and you start seeing layers beneath the surface. Kelsey Mitchell had 8 assists against Phoenix. That's the headline that jumps out. But why? It's not because Kelsey Mitchell suddenly became a distributor. It's because Aliyah Boston was on the court for 38 minutes, dominating the paint, finishing 9 of 16 from the floor, putting up 21 points and 9 rebounds. She was the gravitational center of the offense. Every time the ball went to Boston, it either resulted in a made basket or it collapsed the defense and created opportunities for someone else. That's how you generate 8 assists from a score-first guard. You give her an all-star center rolling constantly. You create easy buckets. You make her job simple. Now think about what Caitlin Clark could have done with that same Aliyah Boston in the Sparks game. Think about the pick-and-roll opportunities. Think about the defensive attention that would have been split between two all-star caliber players. Think about the spacing and movement that would have been available. Instead, she got 2-minute cameos in a roster that looked like a G League rotation with half its pieces sitting on the bench. The comparison isn't even close. One version of Caitlin Clark got the support infrastructure. One version got left out in the cold. And guess which game produced the loss that feeds the narrative? Then there's the Lexi Hull situation, which adds another dimension to this entire pattern. Lexi Hull played 18 minutes against Phoenix. 18 minutes for a player who was bringing legitimate energy on both ends of the floor. She was hitting shots, she was playing solid defense, she was making winning plays. Meanwhile, Raven Johnson, who offers significantly less on the offensive end, played 23 minutes. Raven Johnson got 5 more minutes than Lexi Hull despite Hull being the more productive player on the court. So what's the basketball logic? What's the coaching rationale? Here's the piece that makes too much sense to ignore. Lexi Hull came into the league with Caitlin Clark. They know each other. They have real chemistry that was built before either of them ever put on an NBA uniform. They played together in college. They understand each other's game. They trust each other. And when they're on the floor together, that trust is visible in how they move, how they space the floor, how they anticipate each other's actions. So what happens when you want to build a narrative that the team is better without Caitlin Clark? You start reducing the playing time of the players who have the strongest connection to her. You disrupt those relationships before they can fully develop at the professional level. You make it harder for her to succeed when she does return because now the chemistry that could have been built has been interrupted. The supporting cast that could have meshed with her has been scattered. It's another piece of the puzzle, another decision that makes sense only if you're trying to set up a specific outcome. Now let's examine what Stephanie White actually did in that Phoenix game, because even when Indiana was winning, she was making decisions that should have cost them the game entirely. There was a moment in the third quarter where the Fever went on a 13-0 run, largely because they switched to a box-end-one zone defense focused entirely on Alyssa Thomas. That zone completely disrupted Phoenix's offensive flow. They couldn't find rhythm, they couldn't make adjustments, they couldn't get good shots. And Indiana took over the game off that defensive adjustment. It was working perfectly. The strategy had momentum. The team had seized control. So what does the head coach do after finding something that works that dramatically? She abandons it. She goes back to traditional man-to-man defense and lets Phoenix back into the game. There's no basketball logic to that decision. When you find something that disrupts an opponent that severely, you ride it. You keep running it. You make them prove they can beat it before you move away from it. You don't pull away from it immediately and let the other team back into the game. That's not coaching, that's something else entirely. Then look at the offensive strategy in the fourth quarter, which somehow got even worse. Aliyah Boston had been dominant in the paint all game. By the time the fourth quarter arrived, she was 9 of 16 from the floor, 21 points, 9 rebounds. She was the most efficient offensive weapon Indiana had. She was getting whatever she wanted down low. The post was her territory. So in the most critical moments of the game, in the fourth quarter when you need your best offense, what does Stephanie White do? She has Boston camp at the three-point line, standing at the top of the key, setting screens 25 feet from the basket, taking her out of the environment where she'd been completely successful all game and putting her in a place where she's least effective. It wasn't until the final minute, when Indiana desperately needed a basket and had run out of options, that White finally called a post play for Boston. And what happened? Easy bucket, game-sealing play, which immediately raises the obvious question that nobody can answer. Why wasn't that the entire fourth quarter offensive strategy? Why take your most efficient scorer and remove her from her comfort zone in the most important moments of the game? The answer, if you're following the pattern that's been established, is that Stephanie White was trying to make this game closer than it needed to be. She was trying to create drama. She was trying to set up a scenario where the game remained competitive, uncertain, dramatic. If Indiana had lost, that would reinforce the narrative. If they won despite those questionable coaching decisions, that's even better. Look at how resilient this team is without their star rookie. Look at how they can overcome adversity. Look at how they can win even when their coach is making strange decisions. It all feeds the same narrative. The Indiana Fever don't need Caitlin Clark. And let's be clear about who Indiana was actually beating. The Phoenix Mercury are not a quality opponent. They're not a team that should scare anyone in the league. Phoenix finished the season with 8 total wins. 8, that's not a playoff caliber team. That's not a test of your roster's ability to compete at a high level. That's exactly the kind of team that a real playoff contender should beat comfortably, especially when you have your full complement of players. Yet Indiana needed clutch shots from Kelsey Mitchell and Ty Harris down the stretch to escape with a 3-point victory against an 8-win team, in their own building with all their players available. That's not evidence that they don't need Caitlin Clark. That's evidence that they're a mediocre team masquerading as something better because they're beating bad opponents. You don't prove you can win without your star by beating teams that win 8 games total. You prove you can win without your star by winning championships. You prove it by beating elite competition. You prove it by demonstrating consistent excellence. Instead, what we're seeing is wins over poor teams being spun as evidence that the franchise is better off without its most talented player. Now let's give credit where it's actually due, because the narrative being constructed is more complex than just one simple story. Ty Harris had a genuinely excellent fourth quarter. 15 points on 6 of 8 shooting, 3 of 4 from three-point range, 5 assists. She made big-time shots when Indiana desperately needed them. Those weren't lucky bounces. Those weren't garbage time statistics. Those were legitimate clutch performances that helped secure the victory. And that's going to feed directly into the next phase of this narrative. Maybe Ty Harris should be starting instead of Caitlin Clark. Maybe the backup point guard is actually the better fit for this roster. Watch for that storyline to start circulating in the coming weeks. Watch for it to gain traction if Indiana struggles when Clark returns, because that's exactly what's coming next in this orchestrated sequence. Caitlin Clark will be back on the court for the game against the Las Vegas Aces. And who plays for the Aces? Aliyah Wilson, the reigning MVP, the best player in the entire WNBA. Las Vegas is a championship-contending team with an elite core, so here's what the narrative architects are counting on. Indiana will lose to the Aces. That's a very real possibility given that Las Vegas is exponentially better than the Sparks, better than the Mercury, better than any of the other teams Indiana beat during this winning streak. And when that loss happens, when Caitlin Clark returns and the Fever immediately lose, the story becomes automatic. They won 4 straight without Clark. She comes back and they lose immediately to a contender. Never mind that the Aces are a completely different caliber of opponent. Never mind that context matters. Never mind that reasonable analysis would account for the strength of competition. The people who want to push this narrative won't care about any of that. They'll have their headline, Fever worse with Clark back. Here's what makes this entire situation so fundamentally problematic for the actual future of this franchise. Caitlin Clark brought unprecedented attention to the Indiana Fever. That's not hyperbole. That's documented fact that can be measured in multiple ways. Ticket sales skyrocketed. Merchandise moved off shelves faster than the organization could restock it. National television broadcasts featured Fever games with regularity. Casual sports fans who had never watched a WNBA game in their entire lives suddenly knew who the Indiana Fever were. The economic impact is measurable and significant and transformative for a franchise that had been largely anonymous before her arrival. She generated genuine money and genuine interest and genuine national relevance, and yet the organization seems determined to undermine her, to create scenarios where she looks bad, to build narratives that minimize her importance to the team's success, to suggest that her impact is less significant than it actually is. So the obvious question becomes unavoidable. Why would you do that? Why would you sabotage your own investment? Why would you deliberately undermine the player who brought your franchise into the national consciousness? The only explanation that makes logical sense is that there are people within the organization who resent the attention she's received. People who feel threatened by her popularity. People who want to prove a point. People who want to demonstrate that the team was fine before she arrived and will be fine regardless of whether she stays. But that's short-term thinking. That's strategic vision that extends only as far as the current season. That's not how championship organizations operate. Because here's the inevitable consequence of that strategy. If you successfully convince your fan base, your media ecosystem, your league that Caitlin Clark isn't essential to your success, what happens when her contract is up for renewal? What happens when another franchise offers her a better situation, better coaching, better organizational support, better infrastructure designed specifically to maximize her talents? She's going to remember that her own team spent her rookie season building narratives that diminished her importance. She's going to remember the 2-minute rotations. She's going to remember being taken out of games when she was playing well. She's going to remember her organization's apparent eagerness to win without her rather than eagerness to win with her. You've spent the entire season telling everyone she's not that important, so why would she feel any loyalty to stay? Why would she choose to remain with an organization that seemed to resent her success? The smarter play, the one that actually builds sustainable winning cultures, is the exact opposite strategy. You maximize your star player's strengths. You build your system around what she does best. You put her in positions to succeed. You surround her with complementary pieces that enhance her game rather than compete with it. You make her your priority, not your liability. That's how the Dallas Wings built around Eric Ogunbohl. That's how the Las Vegas Aces built around Aliyah Wilson. That's how championship teams are actually constructed. That's how you create loyalty and consistency in winning over time. Instead, Indiana is doing the opposite. They're playing their star in 2-minute intervals. They're sitting their second-best player when she's on the court, then playing her 38 minutes when she's not. They're limiting the playing time of the players who have the strongest chemistry with her. They're running offensive sets that don't maximize her playmaking abilities. They're creating game situations where she can't succeed. And then they're acting surprised, or at least allowing others to be surprised, when the narrative becomes that the team is better without her. This isn't accidental. This isn't the result of bad luck or unfortunate scheduling or medical timing that just happened to work out this way. This is a coordinated effort to diminish Caitlin Clark's role and importance to the franchise. The evidence is right there in the rotation decisions. It's in the box scores. It's in how Aliyah Boston's injury disappeared the moment Caitlin Clark became unavailable. It's in how Lexi Hull's minutes got reduced despite being productive. It's in how the offensive sets changed when different players were on the court. The pattern is real and it's deliberate. Now here's the part that should deeply concern every Fever fan who actually cares about the franchise's long-term success. This strategy might work in the short term. They might actually convince some casual observers that Indiana is better without their franchise player. They might win a few more games against mediocre opponents during Clark's suspension. They might really sell the narrative successfully. But what happens when the playoffs arrive? What happens when they face elite competition and suddenly need their best players performing at their absolute highest level? You can't flip a switch and suddenly have chemistry and trust after spending months undermining your star player. You can't suddenly have the pick-and-roll synergy between Clark and Boston after running games where they deliberately kept that combination off the court. You can't suddenly have Lexi Hull's confidence and connection to Clark after restricting her minutes for half the season. The damage to chemistry and trust and confidence doesn't just disappear when the stakes get higher. And what about Caitlin Clark's actual development as a player? She's a rookie. She's supposed to be learning the professional game. She's supposed to be growing. She's supposed to be building confidence in her ability to compete at this level. She's supposed to be establishing herself as a franchise cornerstone. Instead, she's being jerked around with inconsistent minutes, inconsistent lineups, inconsistent support from the coaching staff. She's being told through actions, not words, that her organization doesn't fully trust her or believe in her or want to build around her. That's not how you develop a franchise player. That's not how you create someone who's going to lead you to championships. That's how you create dysfunction. That's how you create resentment. That's how you create a player who, the moment she has options, finds somewhere else to play. The really frustrating part is that this Fever roster actually has genuine talent. Kelsey Mitchell is a legitimate scorer who can get buckets in multiple ways. She proved that against Phoenix with 29 points. Aliyah Boston is an all-star center with range, with touch around the basket, with the ability to dominate in the post or step out on the perimeter. Lexi Hull brings energy and shooting, and the kind of connective tissue that wins basketball games. Ty Harris showed in the fourth quarter of the Phoenix game that she can make winning plays in big moments. She can make clutch shots. She can facilitate. Add Caitlin Clark's playmaking and scoring ability and court vision to that mix, and you have the foundation of a genuinely talented team. You have the ingredients for a competitive playoff roster. You have the pieces to actually compete. But you have to actually want to build that team. You have to commit to making it work. You have to believe in your star player and support her and put her in positions to succeed. Right now, it feels like the Indiana Fever organization is more interested in proving a point than in winning basketball games. They're more interested in controlling the narrative around Caitlin Clark than in maximizing her impact on the court. And that's a fundamental misalignment of priorities that's going to have serious consequences. So when Caitlin Clark comes back against the Las Vegas Aces, here's what to watch for. Watch how they use her. Watch whether Aliyah Boston suddenly develops another mysterious injury that limits her availability in games where Clark is playing. Watch whether the rotation goes back to those bizarre 2-minute increments when Clark is on the court, but changes dramatically when she's not. Watch whether Lexi Hull's minutes get reduced again when Clark returns. Watch whether the offensive sets are designed to maximize Clark's strengths or to minimize her impact. Because if those things happen, if the pattern continues, if the same decisions get made in the same situations, then we'll know for certain that this wasn't just bad luck. This wasn't coincidental injuries or unfortunate timing. This was always the plan. This was a calculated effort from the beginning. The Indiana Fever had an opportunity that most franchises only dream about. They had a generational talent fall into their lap through the draft lottery. They had instant national relevance and financial success and global attention. All they had to do was embrace it, support it, build around it. Instead, they chose sabotage. They chose to create a narrative that diminishes their own star. And unless something changes dramatically in the front office and coaching staff, unless someone with actual basketball intelligence and organizational vision takes control, this is going to end badly for everyone involved. Because here's the ultimate truth that nobody can argue with. Caitlin Clark doesn't need the Indiana Fever. The Indiana Fever need Caitlin Clark. She has options. She has skills that will be valuable regardless of where she plays. She has national name recognition and marketability that will serve her well anywhere. She can succeed in any system that actually supports her and believes in her. The Fever, on the other hand, built their entire recent identity around her arrival. She's the reason casual fans are watching. She's the reason the games are getting national broadcasts. She's the reason the merchandise is selling. She's the reason anybody cares about Indianapolis basketball. Without her, they're back to being anonymous. They're back to being the team that nobody talks about. They're back to being irrelevant, so the organization can play these games with narratives and rotation decisions and suspicious injuries. They can try to convince people that they don't need their best player. But eventually, when Caitlin Clark has the opportunity to leave, when another team offers her a situation where she's actually valued and supported, she's going to take it. And the Fever are going to be left wondering why their franchise player left them in the dust. And the answer will be sitting in the box scores and rotation decisions from these exact games. The answer will be in how they treated her when she was theirs. The sooner the Indiana Fever figure that out, the better chance they have of actually building something special, a championship contending roster, a sustainable winning culture. The choice is theirs to make, but based on what we've seen over these past few games, the evidence suggests they're making the wrong one.